All right, what's up guys? Back here at school, I'm getting ready to re-prime the skateboard. So the last thing we did was, it's already been primed once, we sanded it, right? And then we found a few little imperfections that we wanted to fix with finishing putty. I showed you how to do that. Now we're back at the booth. I hung it up the same way as I had before with the looped welding wire. That way nothing touches the edges, okay? I'm going to clean it and then prime it. And like I said, I'll probably just do 2 coats of primer. We don't need to put a lot on at this point. Most of the flaws are already fixed, so we just need to put a little bit on so that we can make sure everything is sealed up as far as the wood and any of the finishing putty that we put on. Okay, so I'm going to be using a couple paper towels. This is the grease and wax remover that we're using, and basically what this does is it takes any of the contaminants off the surface before we spray anything else on there. Any oils or dirt left behind, dust, is going to interfere with the adhesion, and eventually the primer or paint, whatever you're putting on, is going to delaminate. It's going to pop off, whether it peels off, cracks, blisters, something like that. So you want to make sure everything is as clean as possible. Okay. Now, the first time we primed this, I did not use a cleaner just because I didn't want it to soak into the wood. Right now we're pretty much sealed up. There's just a couple real small little edges that are exposed wood, but I won't soak it too much. I'll just put on a light coat and make sure everything gets wiped clean. And with the cleaners, what you want to do, spray it on and then wipe it completely, okay? You don't want to let this dry on the surface, right? Just spraying it won't do anything. You have to actually wipe it with towels to remove any of the contaminants, okay? So a light spray, you just want to get it damp. You don't want to soak it, right? Paper towel. And I just want to make sure I'm thorough and I get everything. I don't want to leave it wet on the surface. Okay? It'll take a minute to dry anyway, but you can see then all the contaminants we pulled off of the surface. Okay? So I'll go and do the other side. Now I want to make sure I get the edges also. And it's going to sit a few minutes anyway before we prime. So we'll have time to evaporate all the solvents. And if it looks like it's real dirty, clean it twice, right? Clean it until you're happy with the results. Okay, I think we're looking pretty decent here. And you'll notice I'm wearing latex gloves. I don't want to get the solvent on my hands, and I also don't want to get the oils from my finger onto the board. So it's a double protection for me and the skateboard. All right. And another word is on towels. Make sure you're using clean towels. I always use paper towels. Don't pick up a shop rag off the floor and try to use it. Chances are they have something in them. Oils, greases, solvents, soaps that can transfer onto whatever you're trying to paint. So always use clean paper towels, I prefer. And that usually does the best job. What you're trying to do is eliminate any chance of contamination. All right? So when we come back, I'm going to blow it off. Maybe take a little tack rag to it to get any dust off of it, even though it's not absolutely necessary on priming. And then we'll shoot a couple coats of primer. All right? All right, what's going on, guys? I'm here in the paint room at school. I'm getting ready to mix up some primer for the panels I have hanging in the spray booth. But when I come in, I noticed the primer. So this is the primer we're using. It's Feather Fill from Evercoat, gray color. I noticed it's empty, so I wanted to start a new can. All right, so here's the new can. I'm going to show you how we get it started. All right. All right, I'm out here in the shop, and I could put this on the stirring machine, but usually it's pretty thick at the bottom. So I prefer to shake it first to get it kind of agitated first before I put it on the machine. Otherwise, sometimes it breaks the impellers that mix the material. Okay, so I want to take it over to the paint shaker. I want to open it up so it'll take a gallon can here. I want to slide it in. and I want to tighten it up. You want to tighten it up tight enough so that the can doesn't fly out, obviously. But I don't want to tighten it so much that it crushes the can either. So you got to kind of feel it. Okay. If the can starts turning, starts spinning in there, you'll know that it's loose. You need to tighten it up a little bit. So I'll put it on here for about a minute, and then we'll switch it over to the mixing lid and get it completely mixed up before we add hardener and everything and start spraying. All right. So put it in your machine, snug it down. Over here is the switch. Let it shake. Leave it on there about a minute. All right, I just took the primer off the shaking machine. Now I want to transfer it over to the agitator lid in case we can put it on the machine and finish mixing it. So what I want to do is open up the can of the new can primer. And then on this one, it's got these little tabs that you pull away. And then the agitator lid comes out. Okay, and you can see the paddles on the bottom, right? So the paddles on the bottom are stirring inside the can and keeping it mixed up. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to drop it into the new can. Pop it on, make sure it's completely down on all four little tabs, and we're going to put it on the mixing machine, turn on the machine, let it stir for another minute or two. All right, so we'll let that sit for a minute or two, and what we're using is the PPS 2.0 cups, along with the new Soda Jet 100 BP primer gun. This has a very large opening in the center. All right, that's a 2.5 tip, so it's going to put out a lot of material really quick. They're really good for priming to get enough buildup of primer so we have something to sand. Okay, so we'll be using that in the booth. Our PPS uses an outer container with all the mixing ratios on this. Okay, we do a liner, so we use a new liner. And it's going to take a new lid, and it's got a strainer in there already. We just keep it in for the primer, it's fine. If the primer's real thick, sometimes I pull that out. Otherwise, it slows down the progress, it slows down the flow of the primer. Okay, so what I'm doing is we're going to mix it, and I'm using, with the feather fill, we use a clear liquid hardener. It comes in these tubes. All right. On these tubes, they have little graduations, full, 3/4, half, and 1/4 full. So we know our mixing ratios for the primer, all right? So basically, for every 8 ounces of primer, and I can show you up here on the board. So basically, for every 8 ounces of primer, we're doing 1/4 of a tube. So 1 tube is good for a full quart, all right? So you have to kind of break it down if you're not using a full quart. 8 ounces, 16 ounces, whatever you need, all right? We usually will make up about 16 ounces or so at a time. That usually does all right. If you need more, you can always make up more. But I don't like to be wasteful, so if you don't need it, don't mix it. All right, so there's a little bit of primer left in this one. I'm just going to pour it in real quick. I don't want to waste any. Throw that away. All right, so the primer's been mixed on the shaker and with the stirring lid, and you basically want to mix this up every day before you use it. Don't let it sit overnight without mixing it. It does settle to the bottom pretty quickly. All right, so on the cups, what I'm using is the ounces, right? So we're looking for 8 ounces, 16 ounces, 24 ounces in that range. So I'm looking right here on the ounces, so it says 22 OZ, so I'm using that column, right? So I'm going to pour it up. Let's do 18 ounces, so I'm going to pour it up to 18. I'm going to put in a half a tube of hardener, and I'm going to put in about 4 ounces of acetone, right? So Watching my ounces. All right, we go up to 16 ounces, and with 16 ounces on the chart it says half a two. All right, so this one's pretty close, it's just slightly over half, so I'll just use this one, it'll be fine. So just dump the whole thing in. And then with a little bit of acetone, so I got some in here. I'm going to put about 4 ounces of acetone. And then stir it thoroughly. With the primer, you want to make sure it's really a heavy-bodied material, so you want to make sure that everything gets mixed up really good, otherwise it keeps settled to the bottom and it's runnier at top. So I want it to have the same consistency all the way through. So make sure you mix it thoroughly. And one way to tell is if I pull out the stick, if it looks kind of heavy on the bottom, it usually means it needs to be mixed up more. You want it to have kind of an even consistency all the way down the stick. Then you'll know everything's been mixed up really well. All right? So it looks all right. Wipe off the stick. I'm going to pop the lid on there. Push straight down and then turn it until the little tabs get locked in right there, and it's ready to go. All right? Next thing we'll do is get our paint suit on, get our respirator cleaned up and put on, and I'll see you inside the booth. All right, so we're back in the booth. I got the primer mixed up, I'm all set up, got my paint suit on, got a respirator. I'm going to be spraying without my glasses. Like I said, glasses, the paint sticks to them, all the overspray, and it's really hard to get off sometimes, so you end up ruining the glasses. So what I've done is it's already cleaned up, so we've already cleaned it with the solvent. Last thing I want to do is just blow it off lightly. Hook up the gun and I'm going to start spraying. I'll do, I think I'll do 2 coats with 5 minutes in between each coat, and then that should be it for the board. And then we can re-sand it once it's dry overnight. Like I said, they got to sit at least overnight around here. You can force it a little bit with some heat, but it's just best spray it, let it sit overnight. That way everything's completely hard, all the solvents are out, and it's ready to go. Okay, so just going to blow it off. You can take a tack rag to it if you want. It's not really necessary at this point, but I'll just blow it off and kind of wipe it with my hand to make sure there's no dust on there. You can kind of feel if there's any dust on there. This is also a good chance to kind of look at it, get one last look to see if there's any imperfections that need to be fixed before you do the final prime. So you better catch it now rather than later. That way you get it fixed. All right, I'll hook the gun up, I'll turn the booth on, and I'll start spraying. All right, so the gun's hooked up. I've got the gauge set, again, about 25 pounds. Same technique. You want to make sure that you start off the panel and finish off the panel. And remember your overlap, right? You don't want to put it all in real tight. You don't want to skip ahead too much. You want to make sure that you're getting nice even passes that overlap the previous one. And I'll get into that more later. All right, so that's one coat. We'll wait 5 minutes for the next one. All right, it's been about 5 minutes. Now the primer's not going to completely dry in 5 minutes. It's still going to be wet and tacky. So you can't wait for it to completely dry in between coats, like some things that we do here. For primer, you just kind of wait for some of the solvents to evaporate and then go ahead with your second coat or third coat. So as long as you let it sit for about 5 minutes or so, depending on the weather, if it's a little colder, you might have to wait a little bit longer. But make sure you don't just keep putting it on one after another. You gotta let it sit in between coats. Before you walk away and clean the primer gun, kind of look over what you just did, whether it's priming, painting, whatever. Look it over before you leave just to make sure you didn't miss anything, or if you need to add a little bit more primer to any of the spots. And use the reflection of the lights on the surface of whatever you just sprayed to kind of see any imperfections or dryness that might need a little bit extra primer. So I was just looking here along the top here. It's a little bit drier and I see a little bit of a divot, a little dent. So I'm just going to put a little extra primer up top and we'll be fine. All right, that looks pretty good. So again, this is going to sit overnight and then we're going to re-sand it just like we did with the other boards. So we're going to let it sit overnight and then start sanding it again with the, what do we do, 320, and then probably finishing off with about a 600 grit. And then at that point, it'll be ready to paint. All right?